if you need it. But essentially, I'm going to be using Shipwrecks Viewer. Okay. Now, the first starting off point for anything that we build web application wise in ArcGIS Online is always going to be our web map. Okay, so you can see here I have my web map open. I have it symbolized, which we covered before, and if I click on any one of these points, I'll get a pop-up. Okay, so I have a custom pop-up done for title, and then it says this vessel was wrecked on, gives the date of the wreck, gives the length and the width of the wreck, and then it gives click here for 3D model if applicable, along with an image. Okay, so once I have that saved, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this waffle icon here, and I'm going to go into Experience Builder. Now, I gave a bit of context in Experience Builder, you know, what it's used for, what it's great for, before, but just to recap, I suppose it takes in everything within your ArcGIS Online account, you know, so it is possible to build essentially a website from scratch. I like to think of it as a geospatial WordPress-esque website builder because it allows you to do just that. Take all your story maps, dashboards, web maps, web applications, instant apps, all that stuff, and combine them with everything that you get in a standard website builder, right? So text, media, blog post, all sorts that you can roll into one. Experience Builder can be multiple pages. It can be a single page. It could be anything you want it to be. And just a quick note, you know, there's a lot of talk around, I suppose, within the Esri community and the ArcGIS community that Experience Builder is eventually going to replace Web App Builder. Might be true. It's not there yet, but it will eventually, you know. So I'm in Experience Builder here, and you can see here. So I have my, you know, ArcGIS Experience Builder website up the top left. I have my recent experiences that I've created. And then I have an option here to create new. When I hit create new, I'm going to be greeted with all these different options. And this is actually where we fell down in lesson 4, was actually going with a template. Because a template, this moment in time, like I said, it's October 2022. Templates actually add a cache onto your web application, and some functionality might get restricted. Okay, so right now, October 2022, I would go with blank full screen or blank scrolling, because lesson 4, I think we went with a jewelry box, I think, and that's where the proverbial stuff started to hit the proverbial fan. So we're not going to go down that route, but there are templates. You know, hopefully they become fully functional, given time. But for now, you know, like there's templates there to essentially replace a web app builder classic. But really, all I want to do right now is just go blank full screen. So once I hit create, then you can see here, as with anything, as we kind of develop within the web application space, on the left-hand side, I get tools that are, you know, these tools here are across my whole experience. Okay, so multiple pages, I can have them if I want. If I don't, these are really just general tools. To the right of that, then, I have these kind of elements that I can build upon, and we'll run through them in a second. In the middle, I have my actual experience, what it's going to look like. I just chose blank full screen. Okay, so I want my application to take up all of the screen, and I don't want people to be able to scroll. I don't want people to be able to navigate pages. This is just a single page experience builder that I'm going to build. And then on the right hand side, I have element specific tools, which you'll see in a second. As I drag across map into here, I get tools or properties just related to the map element. Yeah. And then along the top, I have top left, I have my experience builder. So I'm going to call this Adam's new and improved EB. So EB stands for experience builder. And I have a few different options across here, which we'll get to now in a second when I start to drag across things. Okay, so for instance, if I want to go here and say, okay, well, first thing I want to do is drag across a map. Okay, so it is drag and drop functionality. You can see here as I drag it, it's going to tell me in that little blue square where it's going to be placed. So if I just want to go here, an important thing up the top then, so I can go lock layout, which means that is locked. I can't do anything. I'm furiously left clicking this map element and it's not going to do anything. I can't resize it. Okay, so lock layout, really good for when you're, you know, reaching the end, I would say, of your development within your experience builder. Okay, so but from here I'm just going to resize it now and say, okay, I just want this map to be on this side. I'm going to add in maybe a title. I'm going to add in a few tools up the top, and I'm hopefully going to add in a list here. You can see then by default, okay, so I have a few different options on my right hand side. First and foremost, I'm going to select a map. So click select map and click down the bottom, say add new data. This is going to bring me to my organization. You can see here all the different web maps that I have, or I can go web scene as well. So bearing in mind when the map element within Experience Builder also caters for 3D scenes as well as 2D maps. But for now, I'm just going to click on Adam's Experience Builder map, which is the map I showed you at the start. And I'm going to click on this. Okay, so by default, this is where a lot of people fall down, is that it's not selected by default. I have to go add new data and then add my map. Just one of the many, yeah, it's a bit eccentric, right? But it's one of those things about Experience Builder. Add new data. It's not added by default. You have to left click it again to get that to work. Then from here, I have initial views. So I can click custom here. I can click modify. And I can modify the initial extent of my map. So, you know, Irish shipwrecks, okay, well, there's a lot of blank space up here. So I can zoom in a little bit. And maybe I want to take the UK out of the picture, maybe a little bit, you know, and I can move that across here. And I can say, okay. So I can zoom in if I want. I can zoom out. You know, if I wanted to zoom right in to Ireland, I can do that. Click OK. And once that extent changes, then you'll see that extent changes within your experience. Then as far as tools go, there's a lot of baked in tools that you can use. Okay, so zoom, fair enough. You know, always going to need that. Zoom in, out. The home button then, which will default to the initial view that you set. So if I set default or I set custom, it'll default to that. That's your new home tool. Yeah. In terms of, you know, navigation, locate, compass, okay, they're nice to haves. They're not really the most popular ones. Search, it doesn't really, you know, doesn't really make sense in this particular case because I'm dealing with a lot of offshore stuff. But maybe I want to put in layers. Maybe I want to put in base maps. Maybe I want to, you know, give my end user the ability then to start measuring distances between things. And maybe I just want to select as well, right? So when I do have a list, I can select features and then it'll automatically filter out those ones that I've selected within my list. Maybe I want to do that. Yeah. But there's a whole bunch of tools here. Feel free to play around with them. The most popular ones will probably be layers, base map, measure, maybe select as well. Not too popular. And then from there, then I have tools, layout, and options. I'm just going to leave everything as default now. What's quite interesting about this is as I start to set up my experience builder, what I can do is I can change it, right? So I can say, well, what does this actually look like on a mobile now? Or what does it look like on a tablet? You know, or what does it look like on my laptop? Yeah. And then you can change it accordingly, right? You can have small size maps if you want changes, but it doesn't really make a difference. Yeah, it'll just mean that selected features just goes down to the icon, right? And a few things change, but not much. Now if we go back, insert widget, there's a few different tools here. So I can drag across a legend here. If I want, to have a legend up the top, and I can say, okay, select my map widget, select my map, and it'll tell me all the different ones that are there. So it's symbolized based on type of vessel. I could have that. 3D toolbox really depends on a 3D scene. I wouldn't worry about it. If you do have bookmarks though, there's a bookmark widget there for you. There's draw, which enables your end user to sketch things. Okay, you can do that as well. You can do directions. Print is quite a good one, because if I put a print widget up here, and again, I'm just dragging and dropping. And you'll notice by default this comes in quite large, but there's also options, right? Because I've now added this to my experience, I now have different options, and I can say, you know what, well actually I want this to be compact, and I want it to be in line with these tools up here. So what I can do, I can zoom in down the bottom, scroll across here, and start to get that the same size as the other tools within it. Yeah. What you can do then is say select a map widget with 2D data. I can say, okay, I'm going to select map, and then select utility. Now, unless you have enterprise or anything, there's only going to be one option there, so that kind of narrows it down a little bit. And then you have different options, right? So you can say A3 landscape, A3 portrait, all that kind of stuff. And if you're not interested in the ANSI side of things, you can just delete it out. You can say, well, actually, I just want a map only, and A4 landscape, A4 portrait. That's perfect. So now I've added a few different things to it, yeah? And you can see that's a little bit out, but again, that's just zooming back in, moving your tool if you want, and now I can click live view. When I click live view, I have what my end user is going to experience. So I can say, nice one, this is what they're going to see. If they want to measure things, if they want to measure areas, they can zoom in and they can start measuring distances between things if they want, or they can change the base map, or they can turn on and off layers. Now, I only have shipwrecks on, so it doesn't really matter to me. But what they can do then is they can zoom into an area and they can hit print and say, okay, well actually I want to see A3 landscape, A3 portrait. And what I can then do, which is quite unique to Experience Builder, is preview print extents within the map. Okay, so if I zoom out, it's going to tell me I'm zooming in. And you can see that there as well. Or I can say A4 portrait and hit print. Okay, what that's going to do is work away in the background, return to me a PDF. It doesn't do anything because I'm in live view. I'd have to launch it first, which we'll do in a second. But yeah, just really nice functionality. So you can see there, that's what it's going to print. I can click X. I can reset. Click X, clear that up. Other tools then that you might be interested in, I wouldn't really worry. There's very niche tools within here, within the map-centric side of things. The most popular ones are going to be, map layers, legend, bookmarks, maybe print for sure. But fly controller is really a 3D thing. Coordinate conversion. If you're dealing in multiple coordinate systems, yeah, sure, 100%. Orientated imagery, well, that's predicated on the fact that you have orientated imagery. And suitability modelers and business analyst infographics, these all require additional licenses as well for you to be able to make the most of them in Experience Builder. Elevation profile, again, very much geared towards a 3D Experience Builder. But from here, there's a few different ones on data-centric. So if you do have data, there's a lot of cool tools that you can do, right? Primarily lists. So let's drag across a list here, and I'm going to drag it across into the area that doesn't have it. So, you know, by default then, because I don't have locked layout involved here, I can make this smaller, which is good. I can make my legend a little bit bigger, but more importantly, I can make my list bigger. Or if you want as well, you can just go ahead and delete legend if you want, you know. You can just have a list here if that's your bag. And you can edit it then. So here I have different options for how I want to style it. So if I want to style it in a row, I have options for that. If I want to style it in a column, if I want to style it in a grid, you have different options. But for now, I think I'm just going to go ahead and select this one here. The unfortunate thing about going into the actual templates is you need to restyle it a little bit, move it up the top there. And now I'm going to hit start. I'm going to select data, go in, select my shipwrecks. And you see by default that's connected now. Okay, so it's connected to my shipwrecks. And I know that my shipwrecks data has an image associated with it. It has a wealth of different information around comments and date of wreck, width of wreck, length of wreck, depth of wreck. And it also has name of vessel and vessel type. So what I can do from here then is click on my image. And because I have a series of hyperlinks within the actual data set, I can go ahead and say dynamic, URL, click the curly brackets here, click attribute, and click image available if you're using this data set. Yeah? And what that's going to return to me then is all the different images within that. So you can see they're all different by default. That's perfect. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the text. Just before I do that though, you know, you have different options. You can have it circular, you can have it, you know, hexagon, pentagons, and all sorts of gons. I'm just going to leave it by default, you know, as a fill square. Now you can see here I've messed up the formatting a little bit. No worries, I can always press undo up the top here. Yeah. So to get this to live link then to the title, I'm going to double left click here. So I'm going to left click first. I'm going to click dynamic content, and I'm going to scroll down to name of vessel. Left click outside your experience, and you can see here that's done now. Okay, so that's gone Empress of Britain, and now it has placeholder text for the description. What I can then do is left click the description to highlight it, left click it again, go to dynamic content, and you can start pulling out statistics if you want, depending on your data. We're not going to really get into it, you know, but it is possible to go in and say, you know, sum up the, you know, it's not really a good data set to demonstrate this, but if you did have like prices or counts or population, you can start summing them up. But really all I'm interested in here is saying, okay, type of vessel. And then I can say, you know, I can edit the actual text by going in and saying, okay, type of vessel. You know, date of wreck maybe. And I can just type this in freehand within the pop-up, but then I have the list of the fields within my attribute table, so I can say, nice one. Date of wreck is date of loss, they have it in. Perfect. And then I say, you know, depth of wreck to finish it off. And I can say water depth. And then I can put in M at the end of it. So no real, you know, reason to go in, start editing expressions or anything like that. You don't need to. What you can do as well is, because this is a free text editor, all I have to do is highlight it and I can make it bold. Okay, so I'm just clicking on this. I can make it bold, or I can click on it and say bold, italic, you know, and then highlight my M, bold, italic, and so on. And you have different options, right, when it comes to, you know, fonts. Good thing about, you know, Experience Builder is that it does offer different fonts, so if you want to have a play around with that, you can. You don't need to stick to the Esri default. You can see here it's cut off a little bit of that meter here. No worries, I can just come in here, expand that down, and that should clear that up. Okay, now it doesn't really clear up areas that don't have titles. Okay, so if I wanted to clear up this list and say, do you know what, I know the map is going to show you know, shipwrecks that don't have a name of a vessel. Well, that's fine. Okay, now what I can make use of here within Experience Builder is this thing called views. Okay, so I can say by default it's returning everything within the data set itself. But, you know, for my list, I actually really only wanted to return ones that actually have a name of a vessel, because I want my Experience Builder to look pretty or whatever, right? So what I can do here is go into my data, go into create a view, and I have different options. I can sort it, so I can say add sort field, and say, you know what, I want to actually sort it by, you know, rec length. So the highest, you know, the higher the length, I want that to be on top. And I can go in here, default, and say that's my data view 1. And what that's going to do is it's going to say my name of vessel, and it's going to sort it by length. Alternatively, I can come in here and say create a view, and I want to filter it now and say, okay, I want to put in a clause here to say name of vessel is not blank. And this will return to me all the ones that are not blank. Right, so when I go in here, I can say this is my data view 2, and that's what I want to be returned to me. Now, the only problem with that is when I go into this, so when I reset my data view, so when I change views, okay, you can see here by default, it hasn't picked up any of these things. So this is what I mean when I say in lesson 5 that Experience Builder is a little bit clunky. I'd have to go back in, select it. You can see here it's broken my data link. Even though it's the exact same thing, I need to go back in and reset it, which can be quite annoying and time consuming, right? So if I go in here, I've broken my name of vessel. Even though it's the exact same thing, you know, I just go in here, highlight them all, go back into dynamic content, go name of vessel, and it'll return to me all the different ones. Now this is data view 1. Data view 2 is where I said, okay, I don't want to see anything that doesn't have a name, right? But I'd have to go back in. Oh, just deleted something on my keyboard. Have to go back in, select that, delete it out, go dynamic content, name of vessel, click on this, set my link, attribute, image available, and go on and on and on, right? Which is quite disappointing, really, if we're being honest. What I can also do then, just to finalize that out, I'm just going to go back to default. Okay, and then by default then I'm going to have to reset this image available, you know. So when we say it's clunky, it is a little bit clunky, right? Experience Builder, but remember it's October 2022. Okay, so I have my list then, right? So I have my list. Okay, fair enough, I don't have my filtered view because I would have had to set it up again. And I really want to, you know, this is an express course, right? So feel free to set up your data views in your own time if you want. But again, bear in mind, probably do it at the start of your Experience Builder. Don't do it, you know, halfway through where you have to reset a whole bunch of stuff as well, right? So I have my list, I have my map, everything's working as it is. Another cool thing which is nice is my filter. Okay, so what I can do is add a filter to my experiences. So if I want to do a filter maybe up the top of my list, that'll make the most amount of sense. and I want to drag my list down a little bit, I can say, yeah, that's good enough. And resize my filter here. What I can do then is say new filter, select data, go into my shipwrecks this time, and say SQL expression builder. From here, I can say add clause, and then you can filter whatever you need to filter on the basis of this. So if I just want to say type of vessel, I can say that's fine, type of vessel is, and then put in my settings. It's very important within these settings I put in ask for values, because otherwise it's just going to return the first value of it. Yeah, your end user isn't going to get an option for it. The only other thing we're pointing out here is choose input style. If you have a lot, so I have a lot within this list, but if you didn't, you could put it in as a pill selector. Okay, so it goes across the top, which kind of looks like this. Yeah. And it might just be a little bit too much for this. I have options in the appearance here that I can say, okay, I want this to be horizontal, and maybe I can put it up the top of my experience builder. I can say, okay, I want this to put up the top, but even then it doesn't cover everything, so I'm going to press undo. Really only works if you have like just a few. Yeah. So for instance here, I'm going to say that this is vertical, but I'm just going to go back in here to my expression builder, click the settings, choose input style, and just choose it as a drop down menu. Because that's what makes the most amount of sense for this data set. But if you have a data set and it has maybe 3 statuses within it, or 3 or 4 or 5, you could get away with just putting it in as a button selector. If you only have one thing that you're filtering across, what you can do is say exclude activation styles for single clause. And what that means is your end user just doesn't need to put in an activation. Okay? This is quite useful if you have multiple data sets that you're filtering across at the same time. But if you're not doing that, you can just hit exclude activation styles, because all I really want to do, if I go into my live view now, is go in, type of vessel, and choose which one I want to filter on. Yeah? And you can see here that it's going to filter on. Yeah? Always very important as well, after you're doing a little bit of development work, we hit save, and you can see here that print extent is still there. Even though I haven't selected it, it's still there. I need to go back in, right? And it's just one of those clunky bits again of Experience Builder. But if I wanted to go in and say, okay, by fishing vessel, and what Experience Builder does really well, I know I'm maybe slagging it off a little bit here by saying it's pretty clunky. But what it does really well is each of these elements that I add into it, automatically connect with my map. There's no problem going in. I don't have to set, actions. I don't have to set attribute expressions or anything like that to be able to search it. I've just set up a filter. I've set up a list. I've set up a map, and away I go. That's it. I don't need to set any actions to it. Right? All I need to do is go in, select it, and away we go. If I did want to go in and select these different items here, by default they already filter as well, so there's no it's not necessary to go into actions here. You can, if you want, go in, add triggers, when the extent changes, when the record selection changes, then I change the framework and I filter data records and I say select data, shipwrecks. You can do that, but it's entirely optional, okay? And what that does then is that as I zoom my map, my list changes as well. If I want to go back out of this now, I click live view, and let's have a look at some other different tools. Table is quite interesting. We'll get to that in a second. But in terms of filtering, you have different options here. You can query it, the exact same thing as a filter, just a different interface. You can have feature info. which brings up. So if you have a custom pop-up, for instance, which I do here, you can have that hanging around somewhere if you want. If you don't want, delete it out. It's not necessary because I have a list here. Search is actually quite a powerful experience builder tool, in the sense that, okay, I can find a place and I can search by area code, or I can search by county, that's fine. But what I can also do is, if I go into new search source, I have two different options. I have locator source, but I also have layer source. So if there are codes within your data that you want to be able to search for, you can do that here. So if I want to search name of vessel, I can do that. Okay, so if I put on my live view now, I say search address or place, and I say SSY done. That's going to search for that, or not. Or not, or no, it just needs a second. SS, let's delete that, start again. No results. No, hold on a second. SS. Search result. Ah, there we go. Okay. And then it highlights it, and it highlights it, and it highlights it. Grand. So, yeah, fairly clunky behavior on that. But if you did want to go in, so it's not returning as you would expect, right? So if I go SS here, it's not going to return me any results. But if I enter it, then it gives me all the results. So bear in mind, if you are using the search widget, you need to go whatever you're typing in, Pinto, enter. It's not going to return any results unless it's all caps. Probably. Because I have a filter on as well, right? Yeah. So it all relates, unfortunately. So if I have though, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so just remember your filter is cleared if you're zooming in like I am. And then it'll zoom you to that point, yeah. But not great, but it's good news in the sense that you can search by layer. Okay. So moving on, click off live view, and there's different tools. We won't get into it today, but in editing timelines, you can embed surveys as well, or if you just want to embed text. So if you just want to write a piece of narrative, so if I say, you know what, this search source is actually pretty clunky, I'm going to delete that from my experience. No judgment here. I completely understand why you would want to do that. And I want to move my filter in, and I want to, prepare a piece of text. You can do that, and you can start typing it away. You can align it to everything, and you can say, you know what, this is Adam's experience builder, and then you have options, right? So you go in, you can put this in as 22, put this in as bold. You can put a piece of text in, maybe to describe how your users would use or get the most out of your experience builder. Again, of course, if we are replicating something here, maybe I want to make this bigger. Say this is actually 35. I want to drag this across, and this becomes my title of my experience builder. You can do that. You can put in images, drag them across. Buttons are very interesting in the sense that, okay, so what I want to do is come back to this. Okay, so if I say, you know what, I want a button here that's going to zoom to a particular location, or you might have a button up the top that says, if I put this in as blue, and I can set a link. So for instance, if I wanted to say GIS Express here on my website, and I wanted to link this out, what I could do is put a button here, set a link, go to URL, and say paste this in now. And what I can also do is say app window, so I can choose how opening this URL behaves within my Experience Builder. So app window or new window, click OK, click live view, and when I click that button, it'll link me out to it, right? Not going to work in preview, so what I can do is click save. I can click preview then, so opens up a new preview. I'd really only suggest doing this at the very end of your development work within Experience Builder, but you can see here I have a massive button up the top here, and when I click on it, it brings me to whatever link you've set. Also worth noting that if I go into Experience Builder now and I say, okay, well, you know what, I want to add a page. So I go to Pages, go Add Page, blank full screen, because I don't trust templates anymore. Click off Live View. Click here and go down to Map. So drag across a map, and let's make this full screen then. And what you can do then is select map, add new data like we did before, but I'm going to add a web scene now, and I'm going to say this is, Belfast listed buildings, perfect. I have an existing 3D scene of all the historic ones. Remember, to add this to the map, I still have to click here. So I have that then. So what I can do then is go back to my pages. So this is page 2. And I can say, well, actually, you know what? I don't really want that to set a link to a URL. What I want it to do is link to a page. And what I can say is select current page, page 2. Click OK. Click Save. Open up it in the live view. And I can see here I have button. Click this, and it'll bring me to the next page of my Experience Builder. So you can see how you start to build up multiple pages. Alternatively, what I could do here is say add, and we're right down the bottom now where it gets to buttons and stuff like that. What I could actually do is add a section. Okay, so a section of my Experience Builder, yeah? And I could say, you know what, this section here is going to cover everything. And I'm going to have my 3D scene in here. And a lot of moving around like you would do if you were preparing like a PowerPoint presentation or something like that, where you have to get it along the top. But what you can start to do here is select map, Belfast listed buildings, because I've added it already. Doesn't really make a difference to me. And then when I go to my button, I can set link, and instead of page now, I can say none. Or I could go back and say link to a section. Now, sections, another thing to point out about limitations of Experience Builder is sections are known as views. Okay, so if I go into my actual page here, so you can see here it's down as a section, but within a section it gives you a view, right? It's confusing, I know, but if you are linking it out to things, you need to know that sections become views. Yeah, so if I go link to, select view, page, and I can say OK, right? So when I go then, save it, I can navigate across the top. So for instance, if you have, 2 different buttons, you can copy and paste them in here, and you can just left click this and say this links to 2D map, and then in here this links to 3D map. Now when you hit save, I can then add in another section and start to navigate between my 2D map and my 3D map. So quite useful if you want to start building up things. I appreciate this all looks very kind of basic. Alternatively as well, if I just wanted to delete this out, just focus on my experience builder part of the map viewer of the shipwrecks and the list, I can do that as well, and there's no need, just because buttons do exist doesn't mean you have to have them. The only other thing, just to finish this off, and I appreciate this looks very basic, and if you were to hand this over to a client, you're probably like, hey, I want my money back, But a few different things that I, just to point out. Number one is the embed tool. Okay, so if you did want to embed a video, embed a website within your experience builder, you can do that. You just have to drag it across and embed a URL, and it literally just copy and paste it in. Alternatively, if I wanted to go embed and say, okay, well, I actually know that there's 3D models within this data set. So I want to say, okay, well, my map view is going to come up here, and actually I want my embed down the bottom. What I can do then is say connect to data, select data, go to Experience Builder, go to Shipwrecks, and I want to say that this is going to be linked to 3D model. And quite useful if you do have any kind of links out to things that you want to go in. So selected features, and it's going to rip off that link to 3D models. So if I zoom into an area now, if I click on live view, if I zoom into an area, and again I click on a point that has, not everything within this has a 3D model, right? And only HTTPS is supported. Right, but if you did have hyperlinks out, you can start to embed things as well. Where this is falling down as HTTPS is only supported, but you can start to embed things as well in other applications. The other thing as well worth pointing out, within this are widget controllers. Okay, so widget controllers are quite good in the sense that you can have as many tools. So if you just wanted to create something, maybe up the top here, that you wanted to put in, a bookmark in here, and I wanted to put in the ability to print, and I wanted to put in the ability to filter. Widget controllers are great in the sense that they're just the icons, right? And I want to put it in a chart. I can do all that here, and when I go to live view, then I can set it up. And I can print, I can do all sorts. And then the final thing I just wanted to share with you is this thing about sidebars. Okay, now sidebars typically mean that they're going to be to the side. Not quite, right? So in the sense that if I wanted to have a sidebar, I can have a sidebar that comes up from the bottom, say. Okay, so if I wanted to replicate something like a web app builder, what I can then do is come over here and say, the tools pop up on the right hand side, and I say, you know what, I actually want it to be on the top, and I want my tab to be up here. What you can then do is default size might be collapsed. You can style the buttons, of course, but what I want to do is a sidebar is the kind of container, and what I want to be able to do is put in my table then. So from here you can see I have a table within a sidebar, And I'm going to go ahead and click new sheet here, select data, click on shipwrecks, and you can see here by default I have select fields for initial display. And say I don't want object ID, longitude, latitude, survey leg, I can do that, okay? What I can also do then is allow for export, yeah, within it. So if I click on action, I can say add an action, and I can say, well, when my map view changes, I want to also filter my table. You can do that. Or when I select on the table, I want to be able to zoom to a point. You can set up actions from tables. But what you can also do then is export. So if I click on live view now, just give it a second to load. There we go. So by default, it's going to filter all the ones that I'm looking at here. Actually, I'm just going to hit save and launch this. So you can see here by default then, right? So I have a little bit of work to do on my attribute table, but I can start to expand it, and I can say export all, export to CSV. So as I'm zooming in on my map, this will filter, you know, and then I can go in and say, well, actually, I only want to see cargo vessels. I only want to see fishing vessels. And that'll filter my map view as well. Now, bit of work to be done on this, where it goes expand, and I want to click that off, click live view. Click on shipwrecks. Click on the actual sidebar itself, and I want to say, you know what, the size really should be only 100. Bring this right down to about there. And then you can resize it so that it's minimal, okay? So when I go in, my default state is collapsed. My collapse button is here. And then hit save. Live view. So when I go down, I can expand it up or I can expand it down. Yeah. So you just get a more filtered view of your attribute table. Again, if you want to, you know, make this bigger than it is, you can say, okay, you can come up the top here. But this table then, we'll be able to resize this down to here or up. But again, it doesn't really matter if all you're going to be doing is minimizing it. Yeah, so you can resize it up, you can resize it down. You can move this down as well, down to the bottom, so that I only have shipwrecks. And then when I go into live view, click on this, bring up the table, click it down, bring up my map view. Then, just to make it look prettier, right, so there's a few different ones that we didn't cover at the start, was on the data side of things. This is one of these things where it's like, you know, bit eccentric, right, where you're going in. You can add data at the start, but again, you're always going to have to add data on the right-hand side when you select map elements, so I wouldn't really use it now. And utility services really only applicable if you do have enterprise or something like that. And then to finish off the theme, you can always change, right? You can always design your own theme as well. I appreciate what I've built is fairly basic, but hopefully it's given you an idea, you know, of the tools available in Experience Builder, when Experience Builder might be appropriate. Like I said before, you know, look, we're going to have 6 lessons. You know, the lesson 5 on dashboards and automation certainly isn't going to crash. Maybe it's famous last words and it's going to crash on me as I do it. You know, but it's not going to crash. Map Viewer hasn't crashed, you know, but Experience Builder does just seem like a very finicky, clunky web application at the moment, but there's a lot of potential there, particularly for stakeholder engagement, particularly if you want to build up your website, but it does take a lot of digging into to get to the good parts of it, you know, and really I'd take it on a project by project case. I think, you know, just my advice, it's October, as I've said about 10 times in this call, it's October 2022. The beautiful thing is things change in future. But look, as of October 2022, that's my overview. That's my practical exercise for Experience Builder. And, you know, hopefully things will change. And as they change, hopefully things will get better in future. I hope you found it useful. As ever, if there's any questions on it, shoot me an email, adam@gis-express.com, and I will happily answer any questions that I can on Experience Builder to the best of my ability in October 2022. Thanks.